Rev up your engines! A customer bought this IS250 3 years ago for $5,000. He got a good deal. It only had like 65,000 miles on it. He doesn't like the suspension because it goes okay on flat roads, but once he gets going down the road, then it starts swaying around and doing crazy things. The first thing we're going to check is the front suspension, because on these things, they're notorious for having somewhat weak suspension for a very fast car, and now it's getting older. So there could be something that's obviously worn that we'll check out. But before that, since everything on these are so high tech, I'm gonna use my new little Lex tool thing that only works on Japanese cars, just to see if there's any kind of codes, suspension codes or anything. What the heck? So I'll plug in the scan tool, and in this case, if you ever mess around with one of these, they hide it with a little black cover. So don't be surprised you can't find it, because there's a little black cover. Now it's plugged in. With the key turned on, in this case the push button, with a little diagnosis. And we'll do an automatic scan. Now it's getting a little bit long in the tooth, so I assume we're going to find problems, some of which he doesn't care about, some of which he will. There's a little bit of failures. Let's start at the top and see. The engine has 2 failures, cruise control, ABS, 4-wheel drive, air conditioner. You're going to expect this kind of stuff. So let's just look at the engine just to see what that says. 2 failures. Diagnose. Something I see all the time, engine immobilizer system fault. The battery gets weak, it doesn't start. That means nothing. Well, the ABS system, anti-lock brakes, you don't expect them to work that great. He's not complaining, but it's got some voltage problems with the power supply and stuff. They'll often trip these codes. The light's not on, that works good enough. That has nothing to do with why it kind of sways when you hit bumps on the highway. And the other code is an airbag code. Left current shield airbag sensor. So that's not working perfectly fine. There's not any kind of problems with the electronic suspension system of the car. So we'll disconnect the scan tool and start by checking out physical stuff. Now these are fine cars, but for a harsh driver, and since it's the IS, a lot of people drive them zippy, with the rear suspension, front, lower control arms a little bit weak. The whole system is a little bit weak. Often the inside of the front tires will wear out faster. So we're going to check that. The only thing we need to take in consideration, he mistakenly let his sister drive the car. She had a curb with the right front, blew the tire. So the right front's a new tire, but the other 3 are all about 10,000 miles on them. So if I didn't know that, I might give a bad diagnosis. So always give your mechanic all the information you have. He doesn't care. Even if you hit the curb, just lie and say your sister hit the curb. So we'll jack this side up first. Try not to hit my electric motorcycle. There it goes. It has a full burglar alarm on it. It's crazy. Now this is one of the tires that has 10,000 miles on it. We'll get my flashlight out so we can see it better. There we go. It's relatively evenly worn. There is, if you want the truth, it's a tiny bit more worn on the inside. The outside's a little bit thicker, but that's normal. There's nothing wrong with the tire. It's got 10,000 miles on it. You can see, you can still read the name on it here on the tread. And we'll grab it to see if there's any play. Absolutely no play at all, top or bottom. It's strong as can be. Now when we look at the strut, you can see, okay, it's the original strut. You can tell, see inside here, that's the dust shield. It's broken apart. Now, that's no big deal in itself. A dust shield does exactly what it says. It shields dust from getting on your rod. Because if a lot of dust gets on the rod, it can get on the seal. Eventually, the seal will wear out. Well, they wear out anyways. But when you did replace the struts, you would get a new dust shield too, because this one's cracked from old age. But there's nothing physically wrong with anything else. I suspect the struts are just kind of worn out, but we got to look at the other side too. So we'll jack this side up, and as long as we're here, no play sideways or up and down, and we'll look inside at the strut. Okay, this one, as you can see, the dust boot isn't ripped. So this one lasted longer than the other one. Now, this lived in Massachusetts. You can see superficial rust around, but it's nothing outrageous. You can see the rust on the nut. That's just what happens. But considering where it's lived, it's still in pretty good shape. There isn't a lot of corrosion on it. They know how to rust-proof these Lexuses quite well. Because they're brand new. These things are just put on since the sister had a curb. Well, he got the same tires, too, so that's smart. You want to match the tires. That's for sure. But now technically, he is breaking the rules, because the rules say when you change a tire on a 4-wheel drive, all-wheel drive system, you got to change all 4 at once, because it can cause excessive wear one way or the other. Now, some rules were meant to be broken a little bit, and this is one of them, because as you saw, the one that's got 10,000 miles on it, you still see the name of the tire in the middle of the tread. So it's really not worn hardly at all. So in this case, it's not really going to hurt anything. If, let's say, that thing had 10% of its tread left and that's 100%, it's going to mess with the differential in an all-wheel drive system. But it's so close that in this case, I don't think it's really going to matter. But there's one thing you always got to check, and many people forget it. Check the tire pressure always, so you make sure it's not a simple problem. Okay, this one's got 28. I put a little bit more in, but it got cold today, so it probably went down a little bit. And we'll check the right front, see what it's got. 28 pounds too, so the back two had 28 too. So I'm assuming the struts are worn, but before we go any further, we'll take off this stupid beauty cover, show you a little about this IS-250. And the owner just told me he found a mouse nest under there. He sprayed some mouse repellent. I tell you, these beauty covers are stupid. In that case, it made a house for a mouse. Could have eaten up the electronic system. Luckily for him, it didn't. So maybe just take it off and throw it away. Now, this is an early direct injection system. And some people complain about these things burning oil. But this one's got 95,000 miles on it, and it does not burn oil. A lot of that is bad maintenance because Americans generally are lazy. Personally, I own a car like this, I'd use full synthetic oil, I would change it every 5,000 miles religiously or once a year. These people that push it 10, 12,000 miles, and if you tell an American to change his oil every 10, he might change it every 20, you're going to wear the engine out. That's just the way it goes. And if I had one of these, I would also use that new GF6 oil because it's made for direct injection engines. Extra pressure, extra protection. Doesn't matter what brand. The generic thing is GF6. Make sure it says GF6 on it and you'll be getting the good oil and you won't have any problems. So let's take it for a spin now. It may be an 06, but you can see my shed. It's still got a good backup camera here. Now we're on the bumpy roads of Rhode Island and I can feel just from these bumps, knowing how Lexuses ride, that the struts, yes, indeed are worn, but we're going to take it at a higher speed ride to confirm it. Here we go on a bumpy road a little bit faster. And you can see even though we're going straight, he has to make some adjustments to the steering wheel because it does sway a little bit back and forth. What happens is, if they don't dampen correctly, they get jerky. And when they get jerky, guess what happens? Your steering wheel will start swaying. In this case, the car tracks perfectly fine. If you're going 65, go straight until you hit bumps. And that shows that the struts are worn out, especially the front ones in this because the engine, all that weight's up there, they wear out a lot faster. My advice in this car would be, they're not cheap, so I'd put the front ones on. And if it's fine, great. If not, then I'd put the back ones on. But I definitely would start with the front ones, and you might be able to cheap it out and only put the front ones on. And the owner just told me something. He's mad. He said, don't use Safe Light Auto Glass. All those ads they have, they scratched his paint. They didn't even put these back on correctly. Luckily, it doesn't leak, so at least they put the glue on right. But don't watch all those stupid ads. Safe Light, we treat you right. Yeah, right, all right. They scratched his paint and they didn't even put the trim on right. Typical for any large corporation. Most of them spend more money advertising than they do doing correct work. Especially insurance companies. They tell you how great they are and you're going to save you money. And then when you need to make a claim, I'm sorry, you've got $8,000 deductible. Well, I'm sorry, you aren't covered for that. That's just wear and tear. We're not going to pay for that. So, Safe Light, repair, no. That's what he says and I kind of agree. Now, in the olden days, we'll go back to the shock system. When you wanted to check shocks, all you had to do was push down on a car. And if it kept bouncing, they're bad. You notice it didn't keep bouncing. But that's because these modern cars are much more sophisticated with their strut system. So, now when they're absolutely positively worn out, you'll push on it and it'll go up and down. But that's not a good test on a modern car. The best test is, you do everything I showed, pull on the wheel, make sure there's no suspension parts that are worn, make sure the tires are worn evenly. Then you take it for a road test. And if that baby goes 60 on the highway, perfectly fine. But then when you hit bumps, it starts wobbling around, you know you need struts. And in most cases, most cars have front wheel drive. This is all wheel drive, but most of the weight is in the front engine transmission. So the front struts will wear out first. Just don't go out and buy all four. Get real expensive. It's bad enough buying two. And in the case of these, you could get away with buying KYB struts. They are decent struts, and you could replace them, and you'd want to get the dust shield. Start with the front ones. That fixes it? Great. If it doesn't cost any more to do the back. They're separate entities, and one doesn't have anything to do with the other when you replace them. He'll think about it, He doesn't drive this much. He's got a work car. It's a Honda Fit. And interesting enough, he goes to car dealerships for a company. He checks out cars. And he drives that all the time. This is more his toy. But even that said, he shouldn't have loaned it to his sister. It did this shaking before she hit the curb, and it doesn't pull one way or another, so she didn't do any damage to the suspension. That's not bent or anything, so maybe he'll learn his lesson, won't give her the keys anymore. Hide them somewhere. So now you know how you can check out Strut yourself, see if there's a problem. If you want to do them yourself, a lot of auto parts store, AutoZone places, they'll loan you the tools free. You just buy the parts from them and give them a deposit. They give you your money back when you bring the tools back. It's doable with spring compressors and stuff. But you price out what somebody wants to do them on these, you might say, I'll buy the tools and do it myself. But that's all it needs. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.